My first memory of travelling myself or going on a holiday was, I guess, in the early 1970s. And I went here with my family, and this is Brixham Harbour in Devon. I don't know if any of you have been. Beautiful little fishing harbour in Devon, but also very, very popular and packed with tourists, mostly eating fish and chips and ice creams. And I think I was conscious that I'd crossed over the line. I'd become a tourist. And it felt very uncomfortable. I desperately wanted to fit in. I didn't want to stick out like every other tourist. I remember trying to blim myself into the background almost. And a tourist came to me and asked me the way, asked me some directions, and I felt really proud. I thought, that's great. He hasn't thought I'm a tourist, has thought I'm a local. And I guess I became conscious at this time that when we visit somewhere, it is always somebody else's home. And I guess we're all tourists to an extent. But I certainly didn't want to feel like a tourist when I travelled. Going on a few years now, this is the Ruwenzori Mountains, the fabled Mountains of the Moon in western Uganda. Here I was about 26, 27, and I'd taken a sabbatical year from my career working in an advertising agency. And I rocked up, little village, picked up a local guide, very informal, no real setup for tourism. And we walked around these fantastic peaks, very close to the equator, 16,000 foot, glaciers on the top, very mysterious and magical place. You may have seen it on the BBC's Africa programme recently. I think they spent about 2 weeks there just trying to get one shot of the mountains when the mist and the clouds and the fog wasn't there. And my memories of it were very much the same, but very strongly about travelling with a local guide. I absolutely love that. Him and his mates, you know, for 4 days we went out and we camped and slept in caves. And I got to know him, and it was just a really great privilege. They've got these giant lobelia, which I think is one of the reasons why it looks so otherworldly, and they called it the Mountains of the Moon. I love places with great names. Mountains of the Moon. Nearby is the impenetrable forest. As soon as I heard of the impenetrable forest, I really, really wanted to go there. This is a trip on the Zambesi River. The Zambesi runs between Zimbabwe and Zambia. A fabulous wide river, which you can canoe down if you're brave and perhaps slightly foolhardy. And I did a 5-day trip canoeing down there. Fantastic, absolutely incredible. In the night, we just moored our canoes on a little sand island in the middle of the river, put the paddle into the ground as a rest for a mosquito net, and just slept there under the stars with all of Africa around and the elephants coming down to the water. Really extraordinary trip. And finished up at Mana Pools National Park, which was somewhere I'd very consciously wanted to go. It was the only place in Africa at the time where you could do a walking safari unaccompanied. And to a foolish young guy, that sounded really, really appealing. I also went to the Okavango Delta and spent a few days out with a local guide in a makoro. This is a makoro, this wooden tree hollowed out. This water is extraordinarily clear. So clear that, getting a little bit cocky, I looked down into the water and I thought, I'd like to have a go at paddling. So I said to the guide, I will come to the back and I will paddle. Looked down into the water and it looked about 18 inches deep. Stepped off, and as I stepped off I heard him shout no. And I went in and it was 10, 12 feet deep. I just went straight under. Beautiful clear water. This is Botswana, Okavango Delta. My guide in the makoro behind, a fabulous guy, met him. He sat down in the canoe waiting for me, got into the canoe. It was only after half a day I realised he only had one leg. I think that was consciously why he'd sat in the canoe. And for the next 2 or 3 days he hopped as we walked around the wildlife reserves, but never held us up, So that's the Okavango Delta. And I travelled by bus, by taxi, I borrowed bicycles, and here on the back of a truck with local people through Zambia, in fact overnight into Zambia across the border. And I think I got a great sense of freedom, a great sense of adventure, and a great sense of connection with local people, because inevitably we got talking. And I lost that fear of them and us, and I discovered ways to engage and just to be with people from a completely different life to my own. And that's something which has stayed with me very strongly ever since.